what we want to jump into today is kind of a reflection of what I wish I knew when I started my construction business. It's the title of this one. So it's really what Ben wishes he knew when he started his construction business.
Because you didn't start that construction business.
Because I didn't start a construction business.
Well, I think a lot of this stuff is going to be identifiable to you because you have been involved in starting a business, and there's a lot of things that are common no matter what kind of business you start. But
you're
construction,
right.
Hey, our boys are in construction, boys and girls in construction.
Yeah. So how'd you get into it? Like, I mean, just kind of a little bit of backstory.
Yeah.
What got you into construction in the first place?
I got to spend a lot of hours growing up in construction as a laborer. My dad ran a construction business. And I think a lot of our guys in our audience are going to have stories like this. A dad, an uncle, a grandfather, they work with them doing a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn skills, you spend a lot of time doing things, and then you end up being like, oh, I get good at, in my dad's case, he was a trim carpenter. So got into trim carpentry and craftsmanship, and you kind of learned some things there. I never thought, I love this. I hated learning that because I didn't want to do that.
Okay.
But my dad's like, hey, we're going to the job site whether you want to or not. And, and
You're my
you
son.
learn things.
It's a responsibility.
Son.
A lot of people listening probably understand that.
Yes,
fully,
and I think I think it was awesome. My dad taught me skills that I never would have learned any other way. And so if you have boys out there, and obviously he wasn't harsh about it either. Like, I mean, he was tough, but he was, like, hey, we're going to go out there. And he was just as tough, more tough. He was like, hey, we're going to go do this together. And you're going to be, my little man out there doing stuff.
Practiced what you preached. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so it started from doing
and
then getting more involved in his business over time. And obviously I was running my own businesses on the side, but then, just always that connection back to what he was doing. So I got to spend, I don't know, probably 15, 20,000 hours of time doing things before I was really off to doing bigger projects of my own, which is kind of cool. And then later in life, not to clutter the story, we'll just stick to the construction aspect of my life.
For sure.
But
there was a gap between it.
Yeah.
You didn't have a construction
business
right after you stopped working for your dad. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did a bunch of other things. And then kind of circle back around to it when I needed to build a building. My wife's business was growing and we needed to do something there. And it was like, well, let's build this out. I have that experience that, and there's a fire cry from, working under somebody else who takes all the fall for anything that goes wrong, plans for things to go right, versus doing your own thing. So that's a great experience. Obviously, I've had a lot of business experience before doing that, so that helped a little bit. But building out a commercial building and then just growing from there as projects came along, people asked for things. And I think a lot of guys will identify with that.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you necessarily set out to start it. I mean, I guess I did. I mean, I branded it. I got a name for it and had some business planning, but it kind of grew into that from life experience.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It wasn't like I dreamed of being in construction.
For sure. Yeah,
In fact, it was just the opposite.
Right, just the opposite.
Yeah.
But it turned into it. Yeah.
Yes.
And I think really like the goal behind this episode is so that people listening learn from you rather than like having to make some of the mistakes that you had to learn the hard way too. Is like
you never stop learning, and if you are starting off a new business, I mean, the school of hard knocks is very painful. So if there's anything we can pass along in this process,
for sure,
that'd be great.
Yeah, and I think in prepping we were talking about just like a few different aspects of like things that you learned as part of it. One element was people, another element leadership development, fulfillment and financials. Like it's kind of how we broke it down.
Categories of things I wish I knew more in.
Yeah. So break it down for us. What'd you learn about people when you were starting your business?
Well, first off, you need to learn about when you actually need to add somebody to your team. And that's a really tricky thing because you do a lot of things yourself and you kind of learn about your capacity, what you can do, what you can't do. And that's a learning experience. And some guys I know have tried to hire people and then decide, well, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to keep it small. I'm going to have me and a helper and we're just going to keep it that small. I don't want to manage people.
Right.
And some guys they have more aptitude for that. And in my case, I wanted to grow. I wanted to do more. And the only way to do that is to have a team.
Right.
And so I needed to hire people.
Sure.
Not everybody needs to hire people. And I think one of the things I wish I knew at the time was when you're hiring people is you want things to work out great, right? And you're setting this up to win. You're hiring somebody to join your team, and you really want to vision cast to that person about what the future could look like with them on board your team. But what if it doesn't work? What if you made a mistake? You're hiring the wrong person. In construction, there's so many people because they have some context for construction. They think they know some things.
Yeah.
They're going to go out there and say, yeah, I know. Like I was hiring a guy one time, and he said, yeah, I know electrical, I know plumbing, I know framing, I know drywall. And you're like, okay, well, clearly you didn't specialize in all of those things. Or if you did, you're whiz and I want you on the team.
Sure.
But to be able to say, okay, let's do a trial period.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that this is the right fit. give it a week,
Yeah.
and set that expectation up front. I want to see how this is, and after a week, you can say, okay, evaluate how did that week go.
Yeah.
And I guess the next period was like, there's one thing I learned as well is you can find out so much about somebody in the first day they work for you,
Yeah.
the second day, the third. By day 3, if there's a prevailing pattern of them being late,
Right.
not doing good work, or they're showing character deficiencies,
That's
just
who they are.
just call it. Just call it out. Call
Yeah.
it. Because they're not going to change.
Not a
They're not
good
going to
fit.
improve.
Yeah.
And I hate to be cynical like that, guys, because it does seem to be really harsh to be
Yeah.
like, you know, people don't change.
Yeah.
But the more I recognize how difficult, if I wanted to change myself, Kinsey, if you wanted to change something about yourself, it's hard. You have to choose
Yeah.
to do that yourself.
Yeah. Well, and you can't change people. People have to decide to change. So it's like, I think that from a
Exactly.
leadership standpoint, that's the
Mhm.
issue.
Yeah.
The core issue.
Mhm.
It makes me think too, like before you hire someone, just kind of like hitting on the hiring thing a little bit more. I've had conversations with contractors that own small businesses, and you know they've operated one man show
Mhm.
for 15 years
Yeah.
and been happy doing it because it's like I love fulfilling the work.
Yes.
The business side is not what I love. You know what I mean? And the moment you bring on another employee,
Mhm.
there's more complexity.
Yeah.
And so it's like just making sure, like, what is the vision
Mhm.
for the company before you just decide to hire somebody
good.
off the cuff, you know?
Yeah.
So
What are you trying to achieve by hiring that person?
what's the role look like?
Yeah. And I think there's different roles. If it's a fulfillment role, like you just need somebody out there doing work,
Sure.
It's really important that you define what that expectation. Well, no matter
Mhm.
what the role, you need to tell
Sure.
you need to have clarity before you even talk to the person about what are you trying to fill, what do you want
Right.
that person to do. And the danger is because you're a small business is trying to replicate yourself
Mhm.
because you're supposed to wear before you hire that person. You wore as many hats, did as many things as you needed to do, whether you were good at them or not. You had
Right.
needed to do it yourself, and that's a requirement.
Yep.
And then you bring somebody new on and you have that kind of the same mindset of there being going to be like chief cook and bottle washer is what your role is. And they're just going to be supplement to you, your right hand man, do whatever you need to do. And then you bring that person on and you recognize, wow, they're actually very limited in what they can do. And they actually probably just do drywall. They're just an office manager. They actually are not good at sales.
Right.
And so you need to just, and not really think that you can hire somebody that's a unicorn.
Yeah.
It's very rare to find somebody. And then the other piece of it is if you do hire somebody that's a unicorn, can you even manage that person? Like, can you relinquish enough of your control?
Sure.
Do you have enough to hand off to that person where they can win?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Do you have the right expectations? I mean, what has been your experience with like hiring people and passing things off to them? Because you've hired people and
Yeah.
had to manage teams.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it on some other episodes too,
Mhm.
but like the prevailing thing for me is don't just hire, like if you're hiring somebody on salary, like
Yes.
those kinds of things, don't hire for a project,
Mm-hmm.
hire for the role. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like the consistent role.
Do
So-
you have a role or
Yeah.
you just have a project to get done? You
Right.
need to catch up on your accounting work and you're way behind, so you hire somebody to do that
Yeah.
for you instead of just
If you have one project that you need
Yeah.
some help on,
Mhm.
subcontract it out. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Or
There
like
you go.
find somebody else,
There you
find
go.
a different contractor
Don't
that
take
can
the
just
risk.
partner with you on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Not bringing them on your team and your
Yeah.
payroll and inflating your overhead and, you know, those kinds
Wow.
of things. And
Yeah, I
so
wish I knew that.
because
when I
if
started.
you hire for projects, then it's like they're just sitting ducks for
Mhm.
part of the time, which you're paying for.
Yep.
And you know, it's a lack of motivation on their side because they don't feel like they're adding enough value. So
Mhm. It's
I think
good.
that's important
Yeah.
to know. So
Okay, so now we get to the point of like somebody doesn't work out,
Mhm.
and the temptation is trying to just keep going until something sort of breakthrough. There's some sort of breakthrough, or
Yeah.
they have a role, or kind of they settle into it, they start performing better.
yeah.
Instead of just being like, this is really not working. And I think the other piece is you guys are so busy. You're in the field, you're in your office, and you don't have time for reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times it hits you like a bolt out of the blue where you're
Right.
saying, man, oh man, why am I working with morons? And it really, you created that
Well, yeah.
accidentally. And I
Yeah.
think that was the situation I had in my business at one point where it was like, why do I have the wrong people in the wrong spots? I need
Mhm.
realignment here. And so fire fast, like
Yeah.
really make a point out of making sure
Yeah.
that you have clarity around what it is that you want that person to do. And if they're not doing it, say, I'm sorry, this isn't working out.
Yeah. And you don't have to be a jerk about it either.
So
you can
true.
like let people go
Yes.
kindly.
Yes.
You know, and
Yeah.
I think the whole firing fast thing is really good. And we both want to assume the best in people and
Yeah.
give them benefit of the doubt and those kinds of things. But kind of back to your point earlier of like people don't change, people are who they are.
Mhm.
Yeah, it feels pretty like close fisted, you
Mhm.
know, but I think it's something that the data points to that being totally true,
Yeah.
you know. So
Yeah.
if we believe data at all, you know, that's
Right.
something to follow.
Yeah. And I think the other thing about firing is I've learned to not let people essentially not run somebody down when you're letting them go.
Sure.
It's just being like, for whatever reason this isn't working, and I think a lot of times want to be, well, what specifically is wrong. And I think as soon as you get into the weeds of trying to break it down, and I know there's some like statutory type of things of like why you're letting somebody go. Sometimes people need to prove a point of being like, listen, you stole money. I'm like, if something's really morally wrong,
sure,
you can let them know, listen, that's not acceptable. You blew up at my customer. You stole money.
Sure.
I mean, like, okay, tell them that.
Right.
But if something's a little more subjective, they don't have the right skills. They don't have the right experiences. Like in those cases, don't run them down. Like this is just isn't a good fit for what I need.
Yeah.
I think you have a great future ahead of them. Like, don't run them down because that's really demoralizing.
Yeah.
To be let go from anything.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think having the wrong person on the team is a huge team demotivator too.
Good.
So
Yep.
yes, like stringing them along isn't good for them either. It's not good for you as the owner. And it's not good for the rest of your team because it's like, it's a cancer, right? It brings everybody down if it's the wrong fit, you know, lots of pointing fingers, lots of talking behind your back. So being quick about those things, I think is, you know, it's great for your business because it's great for your people too.
It's interesting where you feel that frustration with that person that's not performing right. And then you assume that they're happy with their role. But most of the time I need to let somebody go. They're like, man, they weren't happy either because they're not meeting my expectations, which doesn't feel good.
Right. They don't feel like they're adding value.
Exactly. Where I'm not happy, they're not happy. So like, why are we torturing ourselves here? And it's not like you have to just like get this, you know, SOB out of the door, like, which I've seen people do.
Sure.
I've never felt the need to run somebody down, but like, there's no point behind that. Like, let's just keep it clean, keep it nice, just being like, let's part ways.
Yeah, don't do that because it's a relationship. Don't burn bridges.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Good. And I think one thing we try to do is being direct, right? Being direct about, you know, with people, with customers, with vendors, with your team, and just learning that skill about calling it out early. I think that was one thing when we were prepping too that you mentioned of just learning to become more direct. Not being a natural skill.
I think one of our tendencies, my tendency is I want to make people happy. I want to please people. Whether that's a customer, whether that's an employee, whether that's a vendor, I want to make people happy. And sometimes I can't make people happy. And I think that's where direct communication comes into place is just saying, I'm not going to speak to what the experience I intend to bring is what can I bring?
That's good.
And this is really acknowledging also some of the stuff we can talk about in a minute, but just like, even where you're at as a business, like speak to it very frankly of I'm just starting a business. We're 6 months into it. Here's the things we have going for us. Here you can talk about your background. I grew up doing these things. I feel like we're good at these things, but don't promise things you're not good at.
Yeah, that's good.
That's that direct communication. It's really just saying, hey, I don't know how to do that. I've never done that before, but here's what, you know, you're speaking to the things that are certain and you're talking about the things that aren't. And acknowledging that. And that humility is refreshing.
Yeah.
Because how many people do you guys know that come along
Builds trust.
Yeah. Somebody comes along and says, I know all about that. And they're just portraying this arrogance where you're saying there's just no way, as opposed to being like, well, I spent 10 years as an electrician. Yeah. And I got my master's license and I've been doing this for a while. And here's what I bring to the table. I'm just starting my own business and I think we can do a great job for you. Yeah. That's all it can be. Yeah. So that direct communication. And I feel like nobody's wanting you to be something you're not. Yeah. So own it.
Yeah. Well, and I think with the direct side, whenever a contractor or somebody is like, oh yeah, I can do this, 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 and this, and this, and doesn't have the unique skill set, it gives you a little bit of lack of trust of what they actually are good at. Kind of like your example earlier of like, I can do drywall, I can do electrical, I can do, you know what I mean? Like all these unique skill sets. And it doesn't build trust. Yeah. It almost makes a question mark in your mind as a customer.
Let's say, I'm sorry. I mean, no, you're good. Yeah. Let's say, though, that somebody believed all that. You're also setting yourself up to disappoint that person. For sure. And then they're saying, well, you portrayed yourself as an expert, and clearly you're not. And I've had those moments. So tell me how I know that. But, you know, even the way I spoke about my team, well, we have a great team of people instead of just recognizing even the limitations there. Sure. No, here's what we're trying to do. Yep. Here's where we're going. Yeah. Here's what we want to deliver. That's good. Is less important than what you can deliver.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. So we hit on the people side. Let's touch on leadership a little bit. What'd you learn about leadership that you wish you'd known when you started?
Yeah. One of the big things that gets missed in really developing as a leader is you surround yourself typically with people that are your direct reports, people that work for you. And they're not challenging you to improve necessarily. They're usually looking to you to guide them towards what do you want them to do? How do you want them to do it? And so you give a lot of feedback to other people and nobody's challenging you. Right. And to a certain extent, neither should they necessarily being challenging all the time, or how's that even going to work? You know, like you need them to do a specific task and, you know, you can't have this conflict all the time. But there's people that can be a mentor towards you. So I think surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you, more experienced than you. And I came around to that. That's something that's not where I started. But boy, did I learn when I surrounded myself with people that were more experienced. And the other thing about this is I've learned is that the guy that's great with his sales, approach, he has a great sales process. He's an amazing salesperson. He might be a terrible project manager. Well, don't throw his advice out because he's poor at one thing. Learn from what he's good at.
Yeah.
Similar to what we're strong in. We might really suck in one area and be good in another.
Sure.
And so not like, what is that? Eat the watermelon, spit out the seeds.
Yeah.
Like,
chew the meat, spit out the bones. Yeah.
There you go. Right. Yeah. So I think that's an aspect of leadership improvement too. That and the other thing is restrict how much time you spend out with people that aren't as good as you. So it's very tempting to hang out with the people that give you affirmation and tell you like you're an amazing boss. I love you. That's okay.
You're giving their paychecks. Of course they love you.
Yeah. And I think that feels good.
Yeah.
But you need to.
When you want to be liked.
Particularly for us that want to actually, we want to win. We want to support people. We want to encourage them.
For sure.
So when they tell you, listen, you're doing a good job, but we don't live for, that's not necessarily an indication of where we're at.
Yeah. I think though, going back to the mentor side of things, you have to have enough humility to seek out a mentor. Like, because if you're like, I'm so awesome, nobody knows, more than I do about anything, then I think realizing that you don't know as much as you think you know is the first step to growth and leadership development. And it's like, putting yourself around people, but it requires you to ask that and kind of die to yourself a little bit in terms of, seeking out leaders who are better than you and getting advice from people and finding the right people to speak into your life. So
this is like a taking inventory of your skills, right? It's even asking those people that are better at you of what do you see that I'm good at?
Yeah.
What do you feel like is my thing? I could just see if somebody came to me, the people that I know pretty closely, and asked me that question, they'd learn a lot about how I thought about them, whether I was right or wrong.
Sure.
But they'd also learn saying, he thinks I'm really good at that. Maybe they wouldn't even have thought themselves as being good at that. If I told them, I think you really are weak in this area, like you're, I can think back of the different things that I've learned from that. Like you promised the moon, Ben, but when it comes down to actually trying to you're promising your intentions.
Yeah.
It's like, that's hard to hear.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, well, I want to do that. It's like, well, can you? That's difficult to do sometimes.
It's not all up to you either.
Well, and the other thing is, other people can disappoint you. Exactly. Not everybody's like you and passionate about what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's the other piece. You need to make a plan as well of like, okay, how do you digest that feedback? Because sometimes you can take it and just feel really down on yourself. I'm terrible. I have so much to learn. How am I going to ever get better? So being comfortable with who you are, and just being like, okay, I don't have to pretend to be somebody different. If they say I'm terrible at that, I'm great. Some of the best moments of my life when I owned where I was at.
Yeah,
and just being like, okay, great, that's me. Like, this is me.
Yeah, you're like, that's probably right. It's probably right.
Exactly.
Thanks
right.
for telling me.
Okay, I know I need to work on that, and I won't pretend to be somebody different. I'm going to try to do better, but I'm not going to pretend that I have it together either. So
good.
I think that's being comfortable with that of saying, okay, I'm going to learn, but learning's tough. So just because I want to do that doesn't mean I can.
It's really good. Really good. Okay, so going to the fulfillment side, talked about people, talked about leadership development, fulfillment. And I know we just had a podcast series on managing projects like a boss. So I think from the fulfillment side, there's a lot of info in that series that would be really, really helpful for people who are, working on becoming better at project management. They don't have to just be project managers, but it's part of your role if you're a construction business owner. And one question I had is hindsight's 2020. I don't know what your answer to this question is going to be, but do you wish that you would have, because your context was remodeling and building, subcontracting out certain types of work and fulfilling some. That's my understanding of it.
Yep.
And do you wish you would have picked a more niche route of like, I'm going to execute this one thing really well versus saying yes to more things? Or did you, like, if you did it again, would you pick the remodeling route where every project is custom? Yeah. It's complicated. Remodeling is super complicated. Every case is custom. So anyway,
this is where we leave surprise content in the, we prep for some things and other things we're just like, let's see where that goes.
I'm curious.
That's an interesting question. In fact, I was just talking to somebody yesterday about when we were doing the cabinet shop. So we ended up having a shop, and we were doing cabinets, and we're doing remodeling work. And some of that was just being like, well, we need to do, it was reactive. It was just saying somebody needed something done that we couldn't find a shop to do it, and they needed a time frame, and we just reacted and said, yeah, we'll do that. And next thing you know, you're building out more things in the shop, and then that's fun. And then we have another project, and we build out more things. And so I think where I would draw the distinction is it purposefully in line with where you want to be at as a business? So in 5 years from now, is that the kind of business do you want to run?
That's good.
And how are you going to run it? And the other thing is, what are your skills in all of that? And I think for me, I probably, if I had to do it again, I would have said no to several things. I would have not brought on experts to my team. I would have subbed out some things. Like I had a plumber working for me full time at one point. What happened was he ended up doing things that weren't in his wheelhouse. He ended up doing things that weren't plumbing.
Yeah, because other work needed to be done.
Right. So we're like, hey, you go out to that job site and you run that project. Well, he's a plumber. So you do fine job plumbing things, but as soon as you put him into concrete, like, well, he's not going to be efficient.
He's not an expert in that. Yeah.
I mean, he could try to do his best, but he's not efficient at it, nor would he pretend to be. So I think that's one of the things. You really limit your exposure to risk when you're saying, okay, I'm not good at that. I don't pretend to be good at that. I'm going to have somebody else do it. And sometimes you're going to pay a premium. You're thinking, well, man, that's expensive. But boy, does it save you overhead and time and pain. And so I think I would have been a little more purposeful on that side, saying no to more things. And boy, I hate saying no anyway, like part of the people-pleasing side.
Well, I think every business owner hates saying no because you're like, oh, it's an opportunity lost. Or like, I could make money on this job and I need another job. You know what I mean? Like that's just the reality of construction in any small business.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I'm going to say yes to something that maybe in 5 years I wouldn't say yes to because I need the job today.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
right. So many times you're not sure I think even the clarity we've gained as a business at Congenius has been from really sticking to something that we know works and not really getting distracted by so many different other angles. And there's people that are going to say, hey, what about this? What about that? What about the other thing?
Constantly.
Yes, right. It's a constant flow.
Yeah.
Right. A conga line of ideas.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they might be fantastic ideas and you can make $1 billion company out of them, but it's like, well, but that's not us. And I think you can only do so much. I think that's the point, right?
Yeah, you got to stay focused. There's an element of staying focused in your lane, you know.
So maybe that looks like as a remodeling business is saying, you know what, we love doing kitchen remodels. We're going to go build kitchens. We're going to do the best possible job we can do with that.
Yeah.
We can build templates around it. We can build checklists around it. We work with certain suppliers. We work with certain vendors. We do the same thing over and over again. Well, you can clean up in that.
Well, because your processes get smooth.
Yes.
You know how to estimate things better. Like your whole business, it revolves around one thing versus 10,000 things.
Yeah. So if any advice for somebody starting a business, specialize in something, whether that's a complete set of processes, like if you're doing bathroom remodels or if you're even if you're a trade like plumbing. Well, what's your service set? What do you do? What do you not do?
Yeah. Well, and I think I'm a marketing-minded person too. If you specialize in something, it is easier to market the thing you specialize in versus I do everything. Yeah. It's very difficult to market.
Yeah.
And look like an expert in the space.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, and the reality is you're not going to be able to be an expert without just wearing yourself out.
Totally.
Because where's the margin if you're the person that has to pull together all these pieces all the time and try to make something work?
Yeah. Yeah. I think though, from the fulfillment side, if I took what we talked about in our like managing construction projects, like a boss series, it'd be setting negative expectations. So, adding padding to the expectations that you're setting in terms of timelines, things like that. And then really don't promise your intentions, which is something you hit on earlier. From the fulfillment side, I think if you can master those two things along with communication, those are, which we hit on a lot in that.
Well, communication solves so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honest, direct, to the point, and kind, like, let's not make it personal.
For sure.
Which is like, it was funny. We had a situation earlier this week in our company where one of my engineers was expressing feedback about a teammate saying, I'm worried about this specific thing. And I just said, well, go ahead and address it. And, just like exactly the way you told me, talk to that other person. He's a leader to this person. So it wasn't like it just appeared like, hey, listen, but he said, oh, you know what? Actually, this is not he doesn't have any problem whatsoever. We just need to do a better job of enabling him to win.
Teeing him up better. Yeah.
But that direct communication, which he's good at, he was able to, giving him license to say, we are direct. We will get to the point. And it was really timely too. Like it wasn't a month ago. Right. It was yesterday this happened and I'm worried.
Yeah. We're not sweeping it under the rug and pulling it. Yeah,
and I think that level of communication is so hard to do. It is. And to do it kindly as well. Like help me understand you're asking questions. I think that's the other thing about starting a business is less assumptions, more questions.
That's good. really good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk money, financials.
Oh.
You're the money guy. You like numbers.
I do
So
like numbers.
so
yes.
talk us through what you learned
Okay.
from the financial side, from the money side of starting out. What do you wish you knew?
Wow, so much, Kenzie. I think the biggest thing that cost me the most money is when my company started growing, is the things that I could do for, I guess, so efficiently as a small business became less efficient as the business grew.
Yeah.
Which is not what I wanted it to be, but it's a reality of it. I remember sending guys out to projects and thinking, well, that'll be a 4-hour job. And 14 hours later, they're getting done with that job. And the temptation is like, you slow pokes, get out there and work faster. But it's like there's a certain level of inefficiency that comes along with scaling a business.
Sure.
There's team meetings. There's communication on what it is that needs to be done and how it needs to be done. There's the logistics of this person needs to be has a specific role in making sure all the materials are on site, and then somebody else is in the back office doing the paperwork side. And when you're a small business and you're doing that all yourself, well, you're doing that nights and weekends, and you're not paying anybody to do it.
Right.
It just happens.
Yeah.
So somehow or another,
hopefully you're paying yourself, but
well, I mean, but it's still not like an hourly wage, right? It's not.
Yes.
It's not factored as a salary. Where
Totally.
You're saying I'm working 60 hours, so therefore I should be making 1.5 times what I otherwise would be paid.
Right.
You're just saying I make $80,000 a year. Wow, I'm getting good money.
Sure.
As opposed to being like, actually, I'm getting gypped.
I'm losing.
Yeah, because I'm working 100 hours a week.
Right.
So that's I might as well work at McDonald's.
Yeah. Good point.
So I think that's the other piece of just recognizing things change over time. And so what you need, or what I discovered you need, is to know where you're at. Not last year, not last month, last week. So did you make money last week?
How'd you figure that out?
Well, it's not an easy question to solve. But
not in this podcast, at least.
Yeah. And in our next series.
In our next year-long series.
Well, it can be as simple as having a simple spreadsheet where you're saying, these are the expenses, these are the hours I had worked, these are the bills. Let's say you took up your overhead, what your monthly expenses are, divided by 4.3, which is the number of weeks in a month. And you said, okay, this is what this is my overhead for the week. This is what I brought in. This is what went out.
Yep.
Did I make money?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It can be that simple.
Yeah.
It's not going to be
It's a
perfect.
starting point.
It's a starting point.
Yeah.
It's not going to be perfect, but at least you're going to know, whoa, we did last week, all we did was a punch list on a project, and we didn't bill out a customer $1. And we had $2,800 of overhead, and we didn't win any jobs. You could see the handwriting on the wall, so to speak, of just being like, well, we're going to be out of business soon if something doesn't change.
Right.
But that fact that it's that timely and that it's not like you can solve those problems, well, last month it was a bad month. Last week was a bad week. Well, next week, let's not have another one like it.
Yeah, it's good.
It's the motivation it brings to you of like, man, we got to get off that job. We need to be done with that punch list because we lost $5,000 last week. The other benefit to this, guys, is that you're going to see opportunities for change orders.
Yeah.
I looked at a project one time and said, last week, why did we lose $7,000? Well, we added something on that we never had planned to do. So I'm sitting down with that homeowner and saying, hey, I made a mistake.
Yep.
Last week we did this. We didn't bill you for it. That homeowner was saying, oh, well, okay,
Makes
I'll pay
sense.
for it.
Yeah.
He didn't want to pay for
Be
it.
better to do that up front.
It would be better.
But
nonetheless,
you've gotta
people will
collect
give
for
you
it.
grace for stuff like that.
for
But
sure.
try billing something from 4 months ago.
Totally.
Nobody's
Not
paying
happening.
It. Nobody's
Yeah.
paying it.
Absolutely. Yeah. If your customer's having to ask you to send an invoice for something.
Yeah. And I got a plumbing bill for 6 months after the work was done.
Yeah. Not good.
Which is tough. It's tough to even fact check it at that point. You're just saying, I don't know if you're here for 3 days or not.
For sure.
Yeah.
I
Didn't feel
don't
like you
even
were.
recall you doing work. Yeah. No.
Right. Who are you? Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Another thing I think that was the business, profit-centered business. You have to run a business like it needs to make money. You're not a charity. And then being able to just recognize I can't lose money on any job and not being okay with that.
Yeah.
Now I know in theory we're not, but really being like, okay, this is not a charity. It needs to make money. How do we ensure that it always does? Because your family's counting on you.
Yeah.
Your people are counting on you. You can stay home and not lose money.
Yeah.
You can take a job on and lose money.
Yeah.
So you can stay home and make more money. Which
Yeah.
is not what you
when
don't
you
want.
said that, I'm like, it feels like my brain explodes. I'm like, wait. that
Say,
doesn't make any sense.
How do I stay home and make more money than working hard?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
That's why.
But if you
well,
lose
don't
money
tell me
on
how
the
I.
job.
Yeah. Don't ask me how
How
I
you
know
know.
that. It's
That's why we're
very
talking
painful,
about
guys.
this.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about
You
this.
don't want to get out there and realize, oh no, there's no money in this.
Yeah, which is the benefit of saying no to jobs that
Yes.
you're not cut
And to
out
your-
for or can't win.
To your point earlier, your question earlier about do you wish, do I wish I would have specialized more? And I think that's the point too. Stick with what you know, and there's less risk in that.
Totally.
Okay, I know what's involved with doing that. Whereas opposed to somebody comes along and says, hey, we want this custom thing going. And then just to be like, I have no idea what that's going to cost, so I'll do it time and materials.
Yeah.
This will be a learning experience for both of us. We'll do a great job. We have no idea what it'll cost. At least acknowledge it up front.
Yeah.
I can't lose money.
Right.
So, and guys, I mean, this is systemic. If you feel like you're the only one out there, you're not. I mean, this is like, so many guys struggle with this. Estimating is tough.
Yeah.
It's why we exist.
Yeah.
To really try to facilitate better processes behind this, to be a tool that you guys can use. But it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
I think one of the things we're trying to solve is like, hey, we want you guys to know whether you use Congenius or something else or a spreadsheet. Like, I don't care. But what you need to know is your costs. What does the job cost you before you say yes to a job? Know that. Know your overhead. Set your profit margin, and then you know you can make money on the job. From that level. So at a basis of estimating those things, those three factors.
Yeah. And if you're having a difficult time getting to that cost element, well, that's where you need to break it down more. And it's painful, I know, but it's less painful than losing money. But break it down into smaller pieces. If you're saying, I have no idea what that's going to cost, well, make it down to a smaller piece. Make it down to a smaller piece. And this is where the mentorship can help too.
Totally.
Go talk to your buddies. Go find somebody else. And it's amazing, guys, when you get out there and talk to somebody and say, hey, can you help me with something? I don't think I've ever been turned down once by somebody when I asked them sincerely and said, can you help me with something, where they say, I'm too busy.
Right.
I can't help you. It's always, even if they turn you down, it's almost being like, well, I can help you with that, but I'm out of town for 2 weeks. When I come back in a week, you know what I mean? You might have to work around their schedule, but they won't just flat out say, go pound sand.
For sure. No, it's so good. I think kind of as we close, it's definitely we're not able to review everything, that you learned, that I've learned.
You could ever know in a podcast.
But I mean, from a summary standpoint, I think, for this episode, really our goal is to give you guys a summary of some of those things to look out for, things to watch for, things to ask yourself. Do you know some of these things? And even just writing those things down and working towards solving them for your business, I think is a really great starting point.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Hang out with people smarter than you, more experienced than you. Be honest, be direct, be kind. I mean, those are the pillar stones of a great business. Yeah. And I think it also is just the bedrock of just leveling up. You hang out with people smarter than you, people that have the experience, they pull you up. Yeah. And if people will drag you down, conversely, that don't have it.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Well, guys, comment on what you wish you knew.
Yeah.
Help everybody out.
That'd be great.
Let's help each other. And
let's get some feedback on here, guys.
Comment what you wish you knew.
Yeah. Construction's tough, guys. I mean, building a business is challenging. We don't pretend to have it all together. We certainly don't. It can be extremely rewarding when you actually start making those breakthroughs. And I challenge for you guys too, when you're in the day-to-day, the grind, the stuff that's, stuff falling apart or whatever it is, it's not always that way. Some of you have good days, but I mean, when you're in the bad days, just remember that tomorrow could be the best day of your life. Yeah. So hang in there. Keep up the good work. Keep up the fight.
So good.
We're here for you. We'll see
catch
you next time.
Yeah.